Right guys, in this video we are going to talk about martial arts in old Japan before the 1600s, okay? Now this is a response to a response to a response to a response. We're going down that route. In fact, I might make this into a playlist and anybody who wants to put in can put it in, just let me know. So basically I made a video called Ninja Martial Arts Digging Deeper, and I basically said, we just don't know what happened in the 1500s to martial arts. It gets thinner and thinner. And then Scott's just made a video. I'm away on holiday at the minute. I shouldn't be doing this video, but my missus has taken her daughters and friends to a swimming event. So I'm here for a couple of hours. I'll quickly get this video out. So if I can, I'll put Scott's video here. If not, I'll link it later when I get a chance. And I'm going to go through his stuff now. So you need to be up to date on those two videos, but basically we're looking, the real thing here is what martial arts did the warriors of Japan use before all the Ryuha started, basically. That's the key, and it's about 50% roughly of the time of the Japanese samurai. So there's a couple of key things that Scott goes into, and you need to subscribe to Scott's channel because you've done a great video on this, as I say. Right, so this is where we're going. The further back in time you go, the further away you get from what's called dojo culture, what I've called dojo culture of the Edo period. Doesn't mean dojos didn't exist, doesn't mean martial arts organizations didn't fully exist, but what we're talking about is that samurai on such a day went to the dojo and did training, and you wouldn't believe how close to modern times it is. I've seen some of the listings for the provinces at the time, and they literally, like, Tuesday we do jiu-jitsu, Wednesday we do, water thingy. It's seriously like that. Then of course you get individual teachings. So the samurai in the Edo period are totally different to the samurai of the Sengoku period and then earlier. But so some of the things that Scott brought up, one of them is the term Ryuha is not that old in martial arts, and I agree, Scott is right here. So when we go on about Ryuha, Ryu basically meaning school or flow from, the word needs to be looked as when it started being used to martial arts. Now so for example, Katori Shinto Ryu, was it first called Katori Shinto Ryu, or is that a name, Ryu? What's the oldest you can get? Does the word Ryu attached to a school go before 1600? Everybody says, oh yeah, this Ryu came from the 1300s, this from the 1400s, but that might just be, but they're always reading Edo period text. So let's get a Sengoku period text from that school. Does it say Ryuha? Then we'll start to get a date of the Ryu. So that's question number one. I need to write these questions down. Then what he's also saying is that samurai weren't always fighting men. Now I do agree with this, but I'm also there. I think it gives the wrong idea for this, Scott. So interestingly, samurai used to do a lot more than just fighting, right? And they, as Scott says, they're landowners, they're overlords, but at the end of the day, they are considered fighting men. Their job is to fight if war comes. It isn't anybody else's job. There isn't another class of people that do it. If a lord goes to war, whether he's samurai or good or bad, the samurai go to war. But Scott's right that they're not, their main thing is not always warfare. So for example, one of the families of the samurai, believe it or not, and I'm doing this by memory, their job was to learn either Dutch or Portuguese, and this is in the 1500s. So their entire clan, the headquarters of their clan, you go there, and their job is to learn Portuguese or Dutch. I can't remember which one it is. So they could trade with the Westerners, because this was before the ban. So they would sit there learning from dictionaries and all that. Now they probably also did swordsmanship and archery and all that sort of stuff. But I've got documentation from the Gunpo Joshu and other stuff where it says, and there's one quote, and it says, some families do archery and swordsmanship, some families don't. Some families focus on the martial arts, some families don't. But basically, samurai are there to go to war if they need to. So while what Scott's saying is correct, they're doing so many jobs, tax, they're doing like languages, trade, all this sort of making everything go, agriculture, the farming. You also get different levels of samurai. Some samurai themselves, like, we don't deal with fighting, that's the lower person's job. And some samurai are like, almost peasants. And the word samurai itself is a bit of a problem because the level of samurai changes and all that, and people get mixed up between Doshin and Jisamurai and all that, and the meanings of those change as well, which when I've got more time and I'm not on holiday, I'll go through. But basically, so let's realign the question because I think it'll go off track otherwise. What fighting skills, by fighting I mean swordsmanship, hand-to-hand combat, spears, martial tactics, are the fighting men of Japan using before the year 1600 or 1550, if you like? What are they using between the year 1000 and the year 1500, 1550? What are they using? Now, if Scott could do another reply video to this, I don't know if he's got time, I haven't asked him, but I usually ask him before I can, but if he can do another video. What is interesting is the transition from a Chinese style standing army, that's the best way I can put it, in Japan to a samurai base. This is something not many people talk about. It's been well done in all the books and the Cambridge history of Japan and all that. It's all there. But actually getting it across to you guys, very few people do it. There was a time when Japan had a more Chinese style outlook. And I think they were copying the Tang dynasty, I think, in the way they set things up. Kyoto, everything's set up. And they had a standing military. But I myself, I only vaguely know about it. And from my knowledge, and I might be wrong on this, so we'll ask Scott, they had a standing army that was paid for by taxes, and it was run by the court, and the court run it. And as far as I'm aware, the Chinese classics were here, I mean, Cornwall, not Japan, but we're in Japan. So that at some point, there was military, there was shields, crossbows, Chinese-style swords, possibly Chinese-style armour, because samurai armour evolved a little bit different. Again, these are more questions you've got to go down. And there is. So you couldn't say that the further back you go in Japanese history, the less organised the martial arts is. There may be very, very organised martial arts from this Chinese standing army style where they're paid to fight. That's their job. So we can't imagine that they were paid to fight. They were stood, they were in barracks, they were doing all this, but nobody knew how to fight. So we assume they know how to fight. I think there's even an invasion of Korea before the 1500s one, and they're all there, so they're all still fighting. Basically, guys, don't ever think that when it's in the past, people didn't know how to do stuff. They know how to do stuff. All the way back to prehistory, we know they did stuff, It might not be organised. So let's try and focus this down. So we've got this fall of the Chinese style fighting, whatever that is, whatever they did, and it's replaced by samurai. And these samurai were from about the year 1000 roughly to about 1500. We have no idea what type of fighting they did. Now, Scott makes an awesome point that he's seen these registered or groupings in temples, and that people were learning to fight in temples, and that is awesome because Miyamoto Musashi says recently out of Katori and recently out of Kashima shrines, they are teaching our religious organizations are starting to teach. We know the Sohei monks were there fighting. We know everything. We know there was a militaristic monk. So we've got this idea that there's military organizations, especially around religion or religious places. But then we have to start guessing at what they were doing. So again, the word Ryuha might not have even been there, but it doesn't stop the fact that we need to know that whoever was fighting, who were Ashigaru, religious people, the samurai, whoever was fighting, how were they fighting? Now, another argument comes here is that you can say all fighting pretty much ends up being the same. Now, I know Matt from Scholar Gladiatora doesn't agree with this. He's saying that no, you can define the different ways, because he doesn't like it when people say, somebody hits in a certain way. The human body can only hit in a certain way, so everybody hits in a certain way. He says no, he thinks the nuances between the two are too strong to actually, make them the same, so they're different. So let's take that argument that the fighting could be considered the same in the 1100s all the way to the 1800s, but we're going to say there's enough difference. So if you put someone from Thailand down in Japan, their fighting style in the 1100s would be different to the samurai of the time, which we don't know what it is. So we have to jump to conclusions, or assumptions I should say. Now, one of the assumptions is there's no one castle, one town law. It's many thingy. I did read, I can't remember who it was, I read an article once where they didn't believe that samurai had cities. Yes, there's the odd city, but actual big cities and this idea of Osaka and Tokyo and Wakayama and all these places was not quite how you imagine it. Back in the early days, it was more just samurai were in the hills and clans, like the Scottish clans were in the hills. They weren't all in Glasgow and they weren't all in Edinburgh. There was just literally thousands of miles of hills, or cubic miles, miles squared of hills with samurai in them. And they, like Scott says, were looking after agriculture. They had specific jobs and they would be allied to different people. But we definitely have fighting in the year 1000 to 1500, and we definitely have fighting men, and most likely these are the samurai. What portion of them fight, what portion of them don't, what portion of them then train to fight but then don't. But even if you swipe through all those questions, The question we're trying to ask is, when we go back to the year 1000 to 1500, you have a man on the ground, he's got a sword, he's got armour, we know this from archaeology and general history, he's got a spear, he's got a bow, and he goes out to fight. Now, he must know how to use these. It's not that he's got no knowledge. So, and also, then it comes down to who's the better fighter. I actually think better fighters are developed out of less structured dojos. So when you get to Ryuhan dojo culture, this is where you get the decline. This also goes in hand with my other thing I say, is that the way of the samurai declined after 1600 fighting. The samurai themselves say it, but they actually, I definitely think that it changes. One, there's not much fighting going on anymore, but that doesn't mean they're not experienced, because it's the same as going to like South America today, or somewhere, a really dodgy place in the Middle East or something. They're on the streets fighting. The samurai were in a very brutal world. They were scrapping, they were sword fighting in the streets. They're going to be professional guys, even in the 1800s. In fact, the guy from Taisha Ryu claims, he thinks that the best sword fighters were from the late 1800s, because you've got urban fighting going on, somewhat chronic. So what we're trying to get to, so my point, is that I think one-on-one family teaching, or the monk to a student, or the monk to 5 students, is far better than these dojos with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800, 1,000 people turning up to the dojo. It's far better to have a couple of good hardened fighters, like your uncle, your brother-in-law, your adopted father, teaching you how to fight, including your own family, of course. Depending on what their family situation is, teach how to fight and then go out. So this comes back to Mats from Schola Gladiatora with how much is the variation between different martial arts. So yes, samurai are going to be basically doing the overall thing. I reckon if you went back to samurai times, you would see them throwing in specific ways. You would see locks going on. You'd be able to name that lock. But it would be that those were the basics of fighting, which you seem to find them in almost everywhere. Locks tend to be the similar ones. But if you go to Mubyoshi Ryu, it actually has a wonderful technique here, and this is when 2 samurai come together, and what he does is he lifts up the tasset, the flappy things at the bottom, and he pulls this, when they've gone to grapple, he just lifts it up, lets go, lets the other man hold on to him, pull out his tachi, believe it or not, and then use it, he says, make my body an in shape, it's supple to that, and then stab under into the groin area with a tachi from here. So talk about quick draw guns to the face. This guy is quick drawing in armour a tachi long greatsword, lifting it up, drawing it and stabbing into the groin while ducking down in the middle of a fight. He's also saying, if you're into cliffs, put your hands behind your back and smash them off. So this is where we get different schools, families teaching different things. So probably everybody, and this is a guess, knows this lot. Everybody's doing this lot. Everybody's doing strikes. Everybody knows how to hit with a sword, how to defend, to an idea. But then I think swordsmanship and spearsmanship and all that was then a set of tricks. And it sounds negative, but I don't mean it's a set of feints and tricks to kill the enemy. That's what I believe, like the changes and differences were. So there you go. Right, it's going to take me ages to upload this because I'm on crap Wi-Fi in the middle of nowhere. So make sure you subscribe to Scott's channel and make sure you crack on this. I'm going to make a playlist for this and we'll start doing it, and hopefully Scott will have had time to go back on this. So sorry for the rushed idea, but a very, very quick overview is, just because it's back in time doesn't mean there's no organisation, even if that organisation is smaller. But in the case of Japan, it might have been an even bigger organisation in the dojo. When we're in the 5th century, 500s to the year 1000, you might have had a very massive military organisation going on. I can't answer that question. Somebody else needs to, or I need to get to a library to answer that one for you. We then have a Dark Ages period where it's like, what were the samurai doing in martial arts? No one has a bloody clue. No one. We have tidbits like they're in shrines practicing. We can only go off what the land is like. They're all in farmsteads, and there's no point traveling 150 miles to train with somewhere, then 150 miles back for your evening meal. Do you know what I mean? It just wouldn't happen. And then it gets to like 14, 15, 1600s, then we start seeing the growth of dojo culture, and then we get one castle, one domain, and we start seeing all samurai around the same castle training together. 1800s comes and swordsmanship is in a new level where people are trying to assassinate each other, urban violence inside of Kyoto and everything like that. So we've got, what we're looking at is the middle story, where it's a blackout. We don't know. This is the same for ninja. It's a blackout. Samurai martial arts is blackout. It's not like people say, oh, the ninjas were mysterious and they didn't write down what they did. No, we just don't have much information about anything from there. Honestly, we know the battles. We know sort of like what was going on politically. But you ask on the ground archaeological questions, I have no idea, you know what I mean, and by archaeological I mean like nuts and bolts of the world, because that's the angle I came from. Right guys, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you when I get back from holiday. And that's Bolt snoring. So somebody said, is it my mother snoring? I don't live with my mother, I'm 43, and also it's my dog.